today I'll be explaining the external features of the brainstem, and hopefully I'll try to make it as easy as possible. So first of all, let's take a look at this picture here. So here we have the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the spinal cord, and in this area we're going to have the brainstem. So the brainstem consists of a midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Again here, the midbrain, pons, and the medulla oblongata. Let's get started first with talking about some cranial nerves. Now we differentiate them by looking at it if it's motor only, if it's mixed, which means it's motor plus sensory, or if it's sensory only. Now for the motor, we think of cranial nerve 3, which is oculomotor, 4, which is trochlear, and you have 6, which is the abducens. And then you have cranial nerve 11, which is accessory, and 12, which is hypoglossal. Now, for the sensory only, it's going to be 1, olfactory, 2, optic, and 8, which is the vestibulocochlear. Now, for the mixed ones, these would be the trigeminal, and 7, the facial, and 9, the glossopharyngeal, and 10, which is the vagus. Okay, now for the brain organization, you can go back to the video for the ventricular system and the rest of my videos to check, for example, um, the tracts or anything else related to the lecture. I just put the slide here, but what I mainly need from it is that to take a look at this picture here. So the forebrain vesicle, it gives me what? It gives me the telencephalon and the diencephalon. The telencephalon gives me the cerebral hemisphere plus the basal ganglia, whereas the diencephalon, it's the thalamus, gives me the thalamus plus the hypothalamus. The midbrain, it stays the same. The only thing that we mentioned in the previous video is that it thickens, and the hindbrain, it gives me the pons, the medulla, and the cerebellum. Now, let's talk about the functions of the brainstem. Why is the brainstem such an important topic for us? It's the lowest part of the brain, and it's just above our neck. We saw it in the picture in the beginning. And it's very important for our life, which means what if there's any injury that happened there, it's going to be extremely fatal. Now, we call it a relay center. What does this mean? It works as in like a delivery center. Okay, so it takes stuff and it ascend it or descend it. Ascending is for sensory, descending is for motor. Okay, so ascending and descending, the motor pathways here. So it's mainly associated with the motor pathways between what the delivery center, it works with which companies, the spinal cord, the cerebrum, and the cerebellum. Now we have something called reticular formation, RF. What is this? Basically, it's the thing that helps in sleeping, breathing, and waking up, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your consciousness, your posture, your movement. All of these important or vital actions for a human to live, they are being controlled by the reticular formation, which works in the brainstem. I hope it makes sense. Now, the cranial nerve origin, we have cranial nerve 3 until cranial nerve um, 12. Sorry for that. Basically, could be motor and sensory. They could originate in the head and the neck. Okay, now we are going to talk about the 7 important cranial nerve fibers, and personally, I used to not like them, but with the mnemonics, it makes actually quite a lot of sense. So let's start with the first one, which is the GSE. Now, how could you memorize this? Is go, see, I. So what does this mean? It's associated with the eye, and we add to it the tongue. So what does this mean? It's associated with the voluntary skeletal muscle that is derived from the eye and the tongue. So voluntary movement of your eye and your tongue. Okay, so again, go, see, eye, and tongue. So this is how you think of it. So whenever you encounter a question talking about this type of nerve fiber, you remember the mnemonic. Okay, now for the G, V, E, we remember it as in go, visit, everything. So everything as in what? Your inside organs. So go visit everything. And since it's inside organs, these organs definitely we cannot voluntarily move them. So it's involuntary smooth muscle and gland movement. We call it either an autonomic or a parasympathetic movement. Then we have and the other one, which is the SVE, which is smile, voice, and eat. Smile, voice, and eat. So it's associated with what? The skeletal muscle, which is in our face, in our pharynx and larynx, because we have voice and eat. So these muscles are coming from the branchial arches. Okay? Now, these three are the motor ones. Now, let's try to memorize the sensory ones, these four here. We have the GSA, you can memorize it as an general skin awareness. General skin awareness. What does this mean? Your awareness of the skin. So the sensation from the skin, the sensation from the joints, the sensation from your skeletal muscle, or we call what the sensation, if you remember, it's called the proprioception, being aware of your surroundings. And then you have the GV a. The GVA is memorized as an gut viscera awareness. So what do you think of it? It's your inside organs, your gut and your viscera. So internal organs, so sensation from your internal organs. What could be these sensations? You might think to yourself, this could be the stretch, this could be the blood pressure, any chemicals in your viscera. And then you have the SSA. So it's memorized as in what? Special senses for seeing and sound. So special senses for seeing and sound. So does this mean vision and hearing and balance? Okay, vision, hearing, and balance. Why did I mention balance? Remember, vestibulocochlear nerve. So vestibulocochlear is hearing and balance. And then we have the SVA. So the SVA is special viscera, aroma, and taste. So special viscera, aroma, and taste. So it's for what? Your aroma, smell, and taste it. So I hope it makes sense. And it's easier than most of, for example, the resources where you have to actually memorize it without taking a mnemonic. Okay, moving on, let's talk about the connections, the peduncles, and the fourth ventricle. Now, what is a cerebellar peduncle? It's basically a white matter that connects what the cerebellum from its name, cerebellar, to all parts of the brainstem. So as you can see here, we have what? I have the superior, which are two, and then I have the middle, which is the thickest, and then I have the inferior. So the superior cerebellar peduncle, it's connecting the cerebellum with what? With the midbrain, which is the first part of the brainstem. And then I have here the thickest one, the middle cerebellar peduncle. It's basically thickest and it's also most lateral and the largest. It makes sense from the picture here. And it connects cerebellum to the pons. And since it's the thickest, the largest, so we think of it as it's the main communication. Now, for the inferior cerebellar peduncle here, it's the lowest one, as we can see here, and it connects the cerebellum with the medulla, which is the lowest part of the brainstem. Now, talking about the fourth ventricle. So, if you remember in the previous lectures, previous videos, we talked about the fourth ventricle. So, the fourth ventricle here in this area, as you can see, it looks like what? This cavity is sandwiched between what? Between the cerebellum and the posterior brainstem. So, this is the brainstem. So, posterior to the brainstem right here, and also it's sandwiched between it with the cerebellum. Now, the floor is diamond shaped. I don't know if it makes sense here, but imagine it like this. So it's diamond shaped. And it will be divided with bands, transverse bands dividing this area. What do we call them? We call them the medullary stria. Of course, we're going to see this later on in other slides, so just keep this in mind. So this floor of the fourth ventricle will be what? Transverse and cut with medullary stria. Into what? They will cut it into an upper pontine area and a lower medullary or spinal cord area. So it will be cut like this into an upper pontine and lower medullary or spinal cord area. Okay. Now let's talk about the midbrain first. So the midbrain, what does it do? It connects the cerebrum to the lower brain and the spinal cord. So it connects your cerebrum to your lower brain and the spinal cord. And if we look at an axial T2 MRI, we're going to see it like this. It looks like what? It looks like Mickey Mouse or an upside down shorts, or also could be a panda face, for example. Now it has what? Ears. It has ears and it has a face center. So the ears here, they are formed by cerebral peduncles, and we're gonna get to know what does this mean later on. Whereas the face center here, this one is the cerebral aqueduct. Okay, and here we can see what? The cerebellum. Now you see here the different types of the brainstem, the pons and the medulla. We're gonna tackle that later on. So, what is the function of this Mickey Mouse faced midbrain? Basically, it helps in your breathing, your respiration, it helps in your BP, your blood pressure, helps in your heart rate, your vitals, helps in your sleep, it helps in your arousal as in like you being awake, awakefulness and alertness. And it does that by what? Remember what we talked about here? Up, where is it? Here it does that via the reticular formation. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Also, what does it do? It helps in your reflexes. What type of reflexes? The sight and the sound. By what? Which tract? Which extrapyramidal tract we talked about in the previous video? Tectospinal tract. Via what? The head and the neck movement. So whenever you hear something or you see something, you move your head and your neck in order to do the reflex and see it. It also helps with your pupillary light reflex. What is pupillary light reflex? Basically, it's when there is a bright light, I'm gonna have a parasympathetic constriction of your pupil. If I have a dim light, I'll have sympathetic dilation of your pupil. Also, it helps in your eye movement using the oculomotor and the trochlear nerve, and it helps in your muscle tone. It helps in your posture and balance via what? We mentioned this via the extrapyramidal tracts or nuclei. And also, it passes the motor corticospinal tract from the cerebral cortex to the spinal cord. Now we have a term, it's very well known, very talked about. It's called alternating hemiplegia. What does this mean? It means basically when I have a lesion in the brainstem, this lesion will lead to what? It will lead to something ipsilateral on the same side and something contralateral. So the ipsilateral, it will affect what on the same side? It will affect the cranial nerves on the same side, and then it will affect what? The corticospinal tract, the motor one, on the other side, the contralateral side. So ipsilaterally, when it affects on the same side the cranial nerve, what will happen? It will give me cranial nerve palsy because they are affected directly on the same side. Contralaterally, when it affects the corticospinal for motor, it would lead to what? Contralateral weakness or paralysis. So weakness or paralysis. Why? Why is that important to know about the corticospinal tract? If you remember from the previous video, the corticospinal tract, it will decussate and the lower end of the medulla. So it will decussate lower at the medulla. So this is a reminder. You can pause the video and read it about the corticospinal tract. This is from the previous video. Okay, so as we can see here, so it affects on the same side what? It will affect on the same side damage directly to the cranial nerve, which will lead to what? Cranial nerve palsy. But on the contralateral side, it will affect what? Before the decussation, it will affect what? It will affect your corticospinal tracts on the opposite side. So it will lead to weakness before the decussation. Okay, now let's talk about the midbrain, the ventral features, or the features that are anterior to us. What can we see? Let's get started. Here we have this interpeduncular fossa. What can I see here? I can see this here. This is the optic chiasma, and this is the optic tract, and this is anteriorly seen. And then on the lateral side, I will see this, the cerebral peduncle, or also called the crus cerebri. And then I will see on the middle here, I will see what? The middle of the pons, or the posterior pons to be more specific. So again, anteriorly, it's very important to know what there is, and laterally what there is, and in the middle, I see the posterior pons. Okay, now let's talk about it. What is the cerebellar peduncle or cerebral peduncle or crus cerebri? What do they do? Why are they here? Basically, they will carry with them the corticospinal tract that we talked about. And since it's motor, it will be descending, going down, and it's associated with voluntary movement. That's why I said when there is an issue in it, it will lead to weakness, right? It also carries another type of tract, which is the corticobulbar tract, which is what the corticobulbar or corticonuclear, it helps in cranial nerve control. Okay, and it also carries the sensory tracts, and the sensory, they are ascending, going up. So that's why it's very important to talk about them. And they were in the MRI, they were the ears, remember? Okay, and the interpeduncular fossa, this one here, it's basically a gap that we can see, but it's full of CSF, and it's between both crura, both peduncles. Then what can I see here? I can see the infundibulum of the pituitary gland right here, which connects what, the pituitary to the hypothalamus. And then I have this and this. These are the mammillary bodies, and we have two of them. And right here I have the posterior perforated substance. How can I differentiate it? You can see it's like there's like points like this, so it's perforation, so it's the perforated substance. And what can I see here popping up is the oculomotor nerve or cranial nerve 3. Now, it's very important to know what? It's very important to know that, okay, I forgot to mention that the perforated area is pierced by tiny arteries. So you can imagine it as a, like these small perforations, they have tiny arteries going through them. Okay, now the circular furrows, which we have here, basilar artery, and then I have middle cerebral artery, internal carotid artery. What's important about the circular furrows that is seen on the ventral midbrain? Basically, it provides blood to the brainstem and the hypothalamus. And if there is any issue that happened here, what will happen here? You remember this nerve here, the cranial nerve 3, the oculomotor nerve, it will be compressed. And then when it compresses it, it would lead to ptosis, dropping of the eyelid, diplopia, double vision, and dilated pupil, mitosis. This is whenever I have what, an aneurysm to circular furrows, because it will affect and compress the oculomotor nerve. Now, let's take a look here at the cerebellar peduncles. What is it related to? It's related to nervous structure and vascular structure. So here I have the optic tracts anteriorly, and then medially, what can I see? Oculomotor nerve, and laterally I can see the trochlear nerve. And the trochlear, you see it coming like this, lateral, because it exits from the back dorsally. It's the only nerve that goes dorsally. And then the vascular structures here, I will have what? I will have this vein. It's called the basal vein, or the basal vein of the Rosenthal, okay, which drains the deep structures. And also I will have um, close to the cranial nerve 3, the oculomotor nerve, I will have this structure, which is called the posterior cerebral artery. And we're going to see a lot of syndromes associated with this one. Okay, and remember, it's close to the oculomotor, okay? Now, this is if you want to read about the basal vein of the Rosenthal. You can pause the video and read it. I'm focusing on the most important things. Now, for the dorsal features, we're done with the ventral. Dorsally, what can I see? I can see what? I can see two superior colliculi and two inferior colliculi. Now, the superior ones, they are associated with L, lateral geniculate body, and L is for light, and light is for vision, so it's visual spinal reflexes. And then the inferior ones, they're associated with the medial geniculate body, and M is for music, and it's for hearing. How can I remember the superior from the inferior? So think of as in like you have your face, and you have your eyes, and you have your ears. So your eyes, they are up, so it's the superior colliculi, and down I have your ears, right? So it's down. So they are the inferior colliculi. This is how you can um, connect it with. Now, moving on, I have here the cranial nerve that are associated with the midbrain, and they are mostly the eye movers. What is associated with the midbrain only? Very important to know. Two of them, the oculomotor and trochlear, and we already saw it on the video and on the picture, I mean. So the oculomotor is the first nucleus that we can see, and we saw it in the picture. Where was it? It was ventrally. It was ventrally and medially, right? Ventrally and medially, okay? And basically, it's between the cerebropeduncles. It was between the cerebropeduncles, right? And most eye movements happen with this nerve, and it's only motor. Remember, it's only motor. That's why I mentioned it in the first slide to know which one is motor, which one is mixed, which one is sensory. Then we have cranial nerve 4. The trochlear is more lateral. We saw it, and dorsal. I told you is very important, and it was below the inferior colliculi. It was what below the inferior colliculi. This is the inferior colliculi, so it's below the inferior colliculi. And remember, this is a pineal gland, okay, just in case for the OSPI. Okay, it's very important to know that it's also motor, and it's the only one that exits dorsally around the lateral aspect of the midbrain. Okay, now let's talk about the second part, which is the pons. So the pons is between what? It's between the midbrain and the medulla. So I have midbrain, pons, medulla, like this. Now on T2, I will see it as what? MRI, a fat belly or a bridge, a fat belly or a bridge. Now let's talk about the ventral aspect or the anterior aspect. What am I going to see? So it will look like a bulge, like this, like a bulge, a round bulge. And I have here a central midline. So this central midline or groove is where the basilar artery would pass. Okay? Now, lateral to it, I will have what? Transverse streaks. I will have transverse streaks. And these are formed by what? The pontine nerves that are running posteriorly to the cerebellum via the what? The midcerebellar peduncle, the MCP. Where is it? Let's take a look at it. So, yes, here. The middle cerebellar peduncle, just reminding you of it. So let's go back again. So I said I have this groove, and then lateral to the groove, what I will have these streaks, these transverse streaks that are formed by the pontine nerve fibers, and these pontine nerve fibers, they will go what? So they're going like this, and they're going posteriorly, okay? Where are they going? They're going to the cerebellum. How are they going to the cerebellum? They're passing through the MCP. I hope it's clear. So again, I have here a midline groove, and then lateral to it I have the pontine nerves forming these transverse streaks. These nerves are going to the back to the cerebellum via the MCP. And then I have this sulcus here called the pontomedullary sulcus. It's what separates the pons from the medulla, like this. Okay, and it has what? Cranial nerve 6, 7, and 8. And we're going to take a look at it here. So what do I have here? 6, 7, and 8, right? So from medial to lateral, I have here the abducens, and then I have the facial, and then I have the vestibulocochlear. And very important to know that here up it's not related to the sulcus. Up, I have the trigeminal, which has two roots, and here the facial has two roots. So the trigeminal, it has two roots. It has the sensory and the motor, and the facial also has sensory and motor, and it has two roots. Okay, dorsally here, what can I see? I can see what? I can see the median sulcus in the middle, and on each side of it I will see an eminence or an elevation called the median eminence, and it's the one that has the abducent nucleus, cranial nerve 6 abducent nucleus. And then right below it I will have what? I will have the facial colliculus, and the facial colliculus has again the facial nucleus. Makes sense. And then here most laterally, most laterally, I will have the vestibular area. And then right under them, I will have the stria, the medullary stria, the pontine part that's going to the back, remember? So the medullary stria is right here. Okay, so this is in the dorsal pons. And then here, remember, this dorsal pons also, it will form what's related to the fourth ventricle. Remember when I said I will have a band that will separate it into upper and lower? So here the pons, the dorsal pons, it will form the upper part of the floor, the pontine part of the floor, if you remember. Now, if I have any pressure of the CSF being high, becoming high, which is hydrocephalus. Again, we discussed it in a previous video. What will happen here? It will compress all of these dorsal structures and it will affect the pons dorsally. Okay, now what is associated cranial nerve that we can see it in the pons only? Those will be associated with your face sensation, expression, hearing, and balance. So I have four of them. I have the trigeminal, the abducen, the facial, and the vestibulocochlear. So the trigeminal, where did we see it? In the lateral and the mid pons, or in the MCP junction. So we saw it in the lateral and the mid pons. Where is it? Here. Or there is a picture down. Yes, in the lateral and the mid pons in the MCP junction here. Okay, now it has two roots. Remember, we said it has two roots. Okay, so the sensory will be the largest one, and then the motor will be the smallest one. And it's for your face sensation and mastication, which is chewing on food. And it's mixed. And then I have the abducen, which is this one right here. It's basically medial at the pontomedullary junction, or the sulcus right here. It helps in what? It helps in your lateral rectus muscle of your eye. So it helps in the outward eye movement, and it's only motor. The facial here, I said it has two roots. So the largest root will be the motor. It's opposite to the trigeminal, and it's for your facial muscles. And the sensory will be the smallest for taste. So it's mixed. So it's the only one mixed here. And the only one that's sensory is the vestibulocochlear, the most lateral one. And basically it has vestibular and cochlear, so it's hearing and balance. Okay, now let's talk about the medulla oblongata, which is the most lower part. And as you can see it here on the MRI, it's basically pyramidal and narrower in shape, like pyramid and narrow in shape, and it's continuous with the spinal cord because it's the lowest one. Now, it's very important to know that, again, we are going to note its ventral features. So ventrally, what can we see? Let's take a look at it here. So here I have this fissure. It's called the anterior median fissure, and it's the midline feature. And then I will see here pyramid, and here a pyramid. Here, this is called an olive, okay, on each side. So first I have what? Median fissure, and then medial to it is the pyramid, then the olive, and then the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, and here under the anterior median fissure, under this fissure, I will have a decussation of the pyramids. So pyramidal decussation, and it will be uh, lateral to the fissure, let's say, not under it. So lateral to the fissure, and it contains the decussating motor corticospinal tract. And we said corticospinal is for the weakness of the body. Now it's very important to know that the motor corticospinal fibers, they're going to cross, and it's basically the exact transition to the C1 level. Now, if there is a lesion that happened above the decussation, it will be contralateral, whereas if it was below, it will be ipsilateral. And again, remember it from the video of the tract, the tractology. We said if it's above, before it decussate, it will be contralateral. But after decussation, it will be what? Ipsilateral weakness. Now, uh, so the olive, we said here, it's lateral to the pyramid. And why do we call it olive? Because it has olivary nucleus, which is important in the extrapyramidal tract. So again, let's revise it again. I have here the anterior median fissure, then medial to it I have the pyramid, and then the olive, and then the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Lateral to the fissure I have the pyramidal decussation. Okay, so I have here again the anterolateral fissure, and here I have a posterolateral fissure. So again, I have what? The anterolateral fissure, the pyramid, and then olive, and then posterolateral fissure, and then the inferior cerebellar peduncle. Now, the anterior lateral fissure is very important to know that which cranial nerve will be here in the anterior lateral fissure. It will be 12, cranial nerve 12, okay? And we also can call it the pyramid olive fissure. The posterior lateral one, it has cranial nerve 9, 10, and 11, which are multiple ones that are joining main trunks, and we also call it olive ICP fissure. So here we call it pyramid olive fissure, and here we call it olive ICP fissure. Makes sense. Okay, now again, revising it in the posterolateral fissure and anterolateral fissure. So in the anterolateral fissure, what did we see? We saw only the hypoglossal, which is 12. Posterolateral, I said I have 3, which is what? The glossopharyngeal, 9, and vagus, and then 11, which is the accessory. Okay, again, we said here anterior median fissure, and then uh, immediate to it is the pyramid, and then the olive, and then the ICP. And lateral to the fissure, I have the decussation of the pyramids of the corticospinal tract. Okay, and in the pyramid here, I have the bundles of corticospinal tracts, but where does it cross? It crosses lateral to the fissure. Now for dorsal medulla, I have what? I have an upper level. It's called the open medulla, and I have, so this is the upper level here, here, and then I have a lower level, which is called the closed medulla. Now, let's start with talking about the upper part. So, if we're talking about the upper part, we need to relate it to the fourth ventricle. Okay, so we need to always relate it to the here, the fourth ventricle. So this is the upper part, yeah. So related to the fourth ventricle. Now, we are going to see what in the upper part. We are going to see this first one. It's called the hypoglossal trigone, which is the most medial one. So most medially, it's called the hypoglossal trigone, which has the hypoglossal nucleus from its name. And then lateral to it, I will see what? The vestibular trigone. And in between both of them here, intermediate, I will have the vagal trigone. So again, the vestibular has the vestibular nuclei. Now for the vagal trigone, which is between them, okay, it has what? It has the dorsal motor nuclei of the vagus, which is the largest parasympathetic in our body. So the vagus is the largest parasympathetic nuclei in our body. This is these three are in the upper part and again related to the fourth ventricle. Now, if we're talking about the lower part, what are we going to see? Only two things, the gracile and the cuneate. So they will connect the central canal and the spinal cord. So what is the gracile and cuneate? If you remember, these are what? The dorsal column tracts. And they will cross and they will give me the medial lemniscus and then they will go to thalamus. Very important to know the medial lemniscus. And basically they are second order neurons, if you remember them, gracile and cuneate. Now, what is the associated cranial nerves with the medulla oblongata here? I have them associated with swallowing, your tongue, your parasympathetic, and accessory. And they are four. I have the glossopharyngeal, the vagus, the accessory, and the hypoglossal. Glossopharyngeal, from its name, is associated with what? Your taste and swallowing, and it's mixed. Now, where did we see the glossopharyngeal? We saw it highest in the posterolateral sulcus. We saw it where? Here. The glossopharyngeal is the highest one in the posterolateral fissure or sulcus, not anterolateral, posterolateral. So it's the highest one, and it's lateral to the olive. So here, yes, so it will be lateral to the olive. So if this is the olive, it will be lateral to the olive. And then for the vagus, it's also in the posterolateral one. Okay, so here it's also in the posterolateral one, but it's below the glossopharyngeal one, and it's motor associated with the pharynx and the larynx. And then for the accessory, again, it's also in the posterolateral fissure, and it's the lowest one. Um, It's from the spinal cord medulla, and it's associated with sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle, and it's motor only. Then we have the hypoglossal, which is the only one in the anterolateral fissure between the pyramid and the olive, and we call it pre-olivary anterolateral sulcus, and it's for the tongue muscle only, for motor only. But remember, um, don't mix it with the glossopharyngeal, because the glossopharyngeal for swallowing and taste. This one is only for the tongue muscle, so it's only motor. Now, test yourself. Okay, pause the video and try to test yourself with this picture. Okay, so right now I'll solve it with you. So right here, what can we see here? How did we know that this is an open medulla? This is the open medulla because we saw what? The fourth ventricle, right? And here I have the sigmoid venous sinus. Here, this is for this picture. So again, the open medulla. Let's go up here. So this is the medulla. So the open medulla, we said always related to the fourth ventricle. Okay, going down here again. This is the pons because it looks like a belly, and this is the fourth ventricle again with the pons. So it's with the pons and also with the open medulla. And here, this artery is called the basilar artery. Okay, I hope you benefited. Thank you very much for listening.